come. We know that a lot of new technologies will come across, and these technologies will influence your competitiveness over time. And if your competitiveness over time goes down, you are being sort of disrupted in the way you deal with it. So we need to think very clever how to modularize the ships for the future, for the coming 20 years, and be able to upgrade them when the time comes, and when we really have the need and the money to do so. Step by step, looking forward, looking ahead, and finding the ways forward.
Can I go to Jan Otto here then, please, because you may need to give him the microphone, because when you talk about modular shipping, sort of like standard designs for shipping, from a class perspective, what's your take on that?
In terms of standard designs?
Modular shipping, I think what we're meaning there is you have some basics, and it's to simplify it, so may I suggest that it's like a kind of Lego. Right. You get a standard hull form, and then you add a little bit of this and a little bit of that to get what you want. But Wärtsilä or whoever have got those standard blocks that you pick and play with.
Yeah, it would make sense. You could say from both maybe the construction perspective and maybe also operational perspective, just to have modules that you can fit together. But funnily enough, every ship we see is a one-off right now. And I don't know how that's going to change. Unless, and there could be also, by the way, talking about disruption could also come maybe from the supply chain perspective, maybe from the shippers. The shippers say, we want to have more efficient, even more efficient ways of shipping our goods. And we force you, basically, like the container liners, to do something in terms of standardizing further the processing of the ships, let's say the containers or whatever goes inside the containers and so on. I don't know if that could be a driver in terms of indeed also more standardizing the ships than they were until now, possibly.
Do you think also that from a ship management perspective, from the crewing perspective as well, that would be an area of simplification for the role of the ship manager, Colin? Because you'd be able then to say, right, we've got standard ships in the same way as standard Boeings and Airbuses.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, Craig, it would make our job significantly easier. Whether we'll get to that stage, I'm not so sure, because even if you had a modular ship design, you've still got so many different vessel types that we would deal with. You're never going to have a uniform fleet if you're a third-party manager that deals with the whole spectrum of vessels. But of course, it would make the job easier. Yeah.
What do you think from a ship manager perspective, when you talk to Wärtsiläs of the world or the ship designers of the world, and they talk about the products, their new solutions, and you're going, oh my word, I've got to change the attitude of these crews again. I've got to retrain the crew to use a more modern engine, another integrated bridge system.
Yeah, well, I mean, a good example is probably RT Flex engines. Actually, when you get those vessels into management, you've got your pool of senior officers. You've got guys who've been working for the company for 20 years and have been sailing on a particular type of container ship. And then you have a completely different requirement, or at least you need to train them, and you need to do it quickly, because the nature of the business is that owners rarely give us the luxury of 6 months warning that a vessel is coming into management. It's quite often 6 weeks or 6 days or whatever. So then you have that challenge of finding the crew who are qualified. But we've got to deliver that, and that's part of our rationale, is to make sure that our prime focus is how can we add value to our client's business rather than the other way around. If that by default means that we add value to our own business, that's fine, but the focus has got to be on adding value to their business, having those people available. So it kind of comes back to the training aspect as well. But there's one, Craig, just one point that just occurred to me earlier that we hadn't talked about, and that was related to the crisis. It was actually, from a management perspective, is financial reporting as well in terms of disruption. Hands on any third-party manager nowadays for financial report has grown substantially. So we can see ourselves and other third-party managers evolving to be less of a third-party manager rather than more of just a general service provider. Technical management is one aspect, but if you can be the best technical manager in the world, but if you haven't got your financial reporting right, then clients with a private equity background at least, or at least with low margins and difficult markets, still not going to be happy. So you've got to get it all right.
So do you think that there's going to be a lot more focus on the ship managers from the owners then to look at the ship managers and say, okay, are you robust enough? Do you have that financial strength behind you?
Yeah, and we can see that already. I mean, Hamburg is probably the best example of that. We've still got, depending on which numbers you believe, 100 ship owners or ship managers. The reality is the vast majority of them are actually ship managers. They're not ship owners, and some of them never were. They were funded by KG money. And there are a lot of small ones around, and there's a lot of consolidation going on. There's still a lot more to go on. And then we will see what happens then. But I think a lot of those smaller ones are, with that kind of environment where you're expected to be an overall service provider, are going to really struggle to step up that level of service that is required.
What's the role of Wärtsilä or the companies like Wärtsilä here? Because you're going for a lot of what Wärtsilä does is about integration of the whole design. You've got the engine, you've got the complete system, you can almost be you've got design houses that you've acquired over the years. You've almost got the complete package to go to a yard and say, look, here's the ship that we can build. Let's go to an owner, Hapag, Lloyd. They can, we'll build this ship for them. You could almost be a ship owner.
Well, we do not have the plans to be owning the vessels. We can run the equipment so that people who are good in logistics can focus on their core business. And if we team up in the proper manner, you can split and use your own competences. And we believe that we can share data from other vessels.
So you're going to be leasing out equipment?
That's a potential business
That's the model
opportunity.
you've got within the land power
That's
segment.
what we are using in the land power business as well. But in shipping, it is not being used. And I think it's missing an opportunity, because if we sort of think of the concept of leasing, the shipyard wouldn't have to worry about buying equipment. They get it for free. That sounds strange, but they get it for free because the overtime issue of leasing is in a different concept. And the operators are sure that we are well aligned, having their interest on life cycle cost at hand, and we can have sort of incentives in those sort of agreements. And we are willing to discuss this sort of element.
Is that sort of a model that you'd like to see from a liner perspective? You might check your microphone.
Yeah. That's a running gag. So it is actually a possible model, because what happens on our side with our customers, they basically tender at a transport from A to B at a cost. And they don't care what ship size we deploy, how fast we go, so what fuel we burn. And if we just apply that to what we do with the ship manager as one of our service provider, we could just pass that one on. And that would basically hand over a slot cost. So can you transport this much of TU at that price? So
And that would
feel
give
free. And that would overcome all efficiency barriers a lot.
Yeah. And for Jan Otto, that would give you.
Absolutely, that sounds good.
But from a ship manager perspective, would that be over? You suddenly find yourself with two bosses. You would have the Wärtsilä who are owning part of the asset, if you like to see the ship as a complete asset. So you'll have one owner of part of the asset and another owner of a different part of the asset. That would be complicated for you, would it?
Yeah, that would make things more complicated, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. I mean, not at all. But certainly, I mean, compared to the current model of our client being the ship owner, contract with the client, we are the technical manager, that's it. That's definitely an added level of complexity, there's no question. Yeah. But that just brings me to another thought. When we were talking before about crew and their ability to deal with ever more complex engines. It's a little bit like 20, 30 years ago when we used to open the bonnet of the car and there were various people, probably not everybody, certainly not myself, who could twiddle around and do something on a Sunday afternoon with it, whereas nowadays it's just you take it to the garage and they take care of it. And that's certainly something you find on board. The more complex these engines become, the less the ability of the crew on board to actually deal with problems that do arise. So then from a ship owner's perspective, you are then becoming more and more dependent on companies like Wärtsilä and MAN for their technicians to go on board. And then you come back to the issue of cost. How from a ship owner's perspective, even if these engines may be more efficient and whatever, keep the cost under control.
Joern?
Yes, I would love to comment on your idea of having like a standard for a ship. And I think we discussed that we have to feed back operational insights quicker into the design loop or into the execution of a voyage. And I think the digital twin mentioned this morning when Pierre opened it, that could be one of the tools, one of the technologies which allows us to train, to operate, to try out, let's say, some virtual ship in a virtual trade far before we build it at the end. Or we could have let's say, a network optimization on that one, and coming back to crew and crew training and to attract probably the right talent. I had one very quick and very smart example of that one, using like virtual reality for new on-hired cadets to basically enter a ballast tank the first time, to be impressed on what it is. And it's so much easier to explain safety measures, how to climb a ladder, what you will find inside if you are inside a tank or a main engine crankshaft or whatsoever. So you could do that safely and well before crew is entering the ship. So I think that there are smaller steps in between before we really do the big bang, but we should start using that.
From Wärtsilä's perspective as well.
Maybe to add to that, and I was also listening to your pledge for more documentation. I think the remote operation, if we start down from the engine or the engine room side, where we can have much more support to the people on board, actually linking them to experts which are on shore, giving them with the means we have today connections, so that they really can do and be supported in their way. And that's different from giving them a thick book of documentation, say everything what you need to know is in here, but better give them the confidence that when it's needed, they can call the expert and they give him practical advice how to deal with the situations coming on board. And I think that's one of the steps we can take towards the future, learning how to deal with these new digital techniques coming up.
Yeah. I'm going to ask Jan Otto for the last word here before we wrap up in terms of a conclusion. Do you think still that this transition is going to be a totally positive transition for the ship? Or do you feel there are might be some hidden dangers for certain corners of the industry?
Yeah, of course. There can always be hidden dangers in such a journey. It's very hard to foresee those. But I think what's important in this process is that you as a company, as a ship owner or operator, are aware of what is happening and really try to have a future which is not just tomorrow, but go a little bit further down, in terms of longer term horizons, just to anticipate what are the possible scenarios that may face your particular operation, your business, and then make decisions as to, okay, what are the likely scenarios which you have to anticipate? There could be risks, and what are the advantages and the pros and cons, and go from there. And by doing this, really, then try to make use of all the knowledge that you have and then can get from other sources around you to make this decision. But it's not going to be an easy one, sure. Especially for the leaders who talk about the smaller companies that do not have, say, extensive technical department. They will have to rely on other sources of information to make their decisions. And that's going to be a challenge, really.
Good. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thank you. And we'll start the next talk here with Speedcast in 10 minutes. Thank you. Here with Speedcast in 10 minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.